Hello folks and welcome to this week's That's Mental Mate. It'll be the last That's Mental Mate of 2023. I'm just going to give it a few weeks break for everyone to enjoy their Christmas, for me to enjoy my Christmas instead of trying to sort out interviews and editing and stuff. And I'm sure you don't really want to listen to me or anyone else crying on about horrible things and situations when you're trying to enjoy your turkey dinner. But I just want to take this moment to thank everyone for both guests and listeners. Whenever I started this, I had like the inkling that I wanted to do something with it, and I thought if I get 6 episodes out of it, that'll be a season. It'll be great, and we're at double that, and I've got a list of people for the new year as well. So it just shows you how detrimental mental health still is to talk about it and for people to listen to it. I'm feeling a bit self-conscious at the moment because this episode's going to be a little bit different. So usually I'm sitting at a kitchen table or a dining room table, either on the laptop fighting with Zoom because it's not connecting, or I've got someone in front of me. But this episode's going to be a wee bit different. I kind of contemplated whether or not to do this episode for a while. Not only because I feel awkward because I'm just kind of sitting on my sofa by myself talking to a microphone. That's daunting enough as it is, but because I always knew that, and I've told people that I've started this podcast because I've went through mental health issues myself, and I just don't think it's very fair for me to expect these people to come on and talk about their lives and for me to sit back and listen, especially when it was all my idea. So I thought it's about time to get on the other side of the microphone. I was kind of thinking, who's going to care, who's going to listen? So if you don't, just turn off and I'll see you in the new year. But at the end of the day, the other guests might have had the same feelings. So if they can be brave and come on and talk about their story, I suppose I can as well. It's a bit of a long-winded kind of journey. I've kind of put it down into points as to where I've noticed, so I suppose there's no better way to start than at the actual start. So I was born in July 1992. My mum was a single mum after she was married to a man. My biological father, I'll never ever call him my dad, to try and distinguish between them, and also because I don't feel like he's got the right to earn that title. She was married to him. She found out that she was pregnant. She told him and he left. Now, not to upset anyone, but I'll just kind of tell the story of what I've been told, whether it's true or not. It's in whoever's eyes. Some people might not agree with me, but he left her for a woman who he was cheating on her with. So whenever she found out that he was unfaithful to her, she kind of... I need to be delicate with this because I don't want to offend anyone, and also it's not my story to tell. My mum's a very private person, and I don't want to be airing her dirty laundry, but basically what happened is she said she didn't want him to have anything to do with me. Not that it seemed like he cared anyway. But yeah, so she brought me up by herself for the first 6 months. And then she met my dad, who I'll always say is my dad because I've known him since I was 6 months old. I respect him for what he done. He met my mum with a 6-month-old child and he took me on. He adopted me. He didn't even want me to know that I wasn't his biological son. But the family, not solicitor, it was advised anyway that I was told, so I never remember anything different. The reason I'm kind of talking about that is because it's going to impact bits and pieces throughout my adult life as well as teenage years. So I think I don't never remember being very upset or very sad as a child. I had a very happy upbringing. My mum and dad got married and had my brother and 2 sisters. we grew up very, very happy, never had to really worry about anything. We were treated very well. And then I think when I went to secondary school, that's whenever cracks started to show in my mental health. So I kind of always remember, I wouldn't say that I was bullied, but I kind of always remember struggling with other kids my age. Like, I don't think I had a problem approaching them, but it was whatever way they reacted to me. So, for example, everyone in my class in primary school, all the boys played football, and I did try. I genuinely did try. I remember like going into nets and really trying, and it was like if I let a goal through, it was like I just lost the World Cup in Brazil 2002. I wasn't in a 10-year-old lunchtime game in Drumahoe. So I just, and to this day, that still annoys me when people get really annoyed over football games. So I kind of moved away from that. And when I went into secondary school, I think I found it quite hard to make friends as well. My cousin, who is the same age as me, 3 months younger, I kind of started hanging around with her. But then it was a case of that was her friends. And I remember one girl actually saying that to me one time, that she's your cousin, she's not your friend. And for something at 11 years old, for that to stand out is quite strange, that I still remember that 20 years later. But that's when I decided, right, I'm going to have to try and branch off here. And I remember making friends with a group who were already established. They were very, very good friends from primary school, probably even nursery school, I'd say. And it was fine for a couple of months, and then I think it kind of went pear-shaped. So I remember we went to badminton on a Tuesday night. That shows how exciting my life was. But I remember us going to badminton on a Tuesday night, and I would say something like, "Oh, are you going to badminton tonight?" And they'd be like, No, I'm not going tonight. And I would go, and they'd be there. So they were lying to try and get me not to go. I remember if we were sitting in the canteen and I took something up to the bin, or took like my plate back up to the tray, I remember turning around and they were all running, like really running out the door to get away from me, it felt like. And that kind of hurt. And looking back now, it's abandonment issues, I can never say that word, abandonment issues that flared up inside of me. I never knew it was a problem, but it clearly is. From when your two most important people in your life are supposed to be there and one wasn't there, it obviously created something in me that I didn't know was there. And I remember I went on then I think my mental health really started to be affected then. And I remember one of them sent me an email saying that they didn't want to be friends anymore. And when you're 13, 14, like, that's the worst thing can ever happen to someone. Looking back now, I laugh at it. I'm like, how immature. But obviously it was like, I finally found a friend group, and we're destroyed. My whole life is shocking now. But from there we moved forward, or I moved forward, made a couple of other friends, but my mental health, I don't think, ever really came back from there. And I think it was hormones as well. And I wasn't sleeping. I still struggle with my sleep to this day. And I would see that my mental health would massively be affected if I don't sleep. So I think that was a massive contributor as well. I fell in with quite a good lot of friends that I would still be friendly enough with now, but I can never trust them 100%. And even to this day, like, I'm 31 years old now, if I see someone, two of my friends out and they're at a bar or they're out walking, or maybe 3 or 4 of them are out, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't invited, and it takes me back to that 13-year-old boy. And it's so stupid to think that, because obviously I'm 20 years older now, but I can't help it. But I suppose that's when with therapy that's helped me. And I know it's going to be really weird for me to describe all these things because I've had so many years of therapy that I can sit and tell you, like, oh, that's an abandonment issues coming out, and that's because of X, Y, and Z. But that's just how I've programmed my life and how I've programmed my mind, and it's how I've moved forward. So I can't really help that, but I'll try and be as sincere and genuine as I can. I did want to do this with someone else to try and have a conversation, but I didn't want to feel like I was forcing anyone to have a conversation they didn't want to have, and I didn't want to annoy anyone. And I felt like, I know this is so stupid because you say what talk to people if you're having a bad day, but I felt like maybe it was something I wanted to do by myself. Then I asked a few people and they said that they wouldn't mind doing it. But now, as awkward as I feel like I can have control over the whole conversation because, like I said, although this is my story, there's some people that I don't want to offend, and some of the parts of my story aren't my story to tell, so I can kind of take it where it needs to be, and hopefully no one will be offended by it. So yeah, my mental health definitely started in secondary school. Just petty things like that, not trusting anyone, falling out with my friends, falling out with family. I remember just being like, I don't want to, if this is what life's going to be. Like, obviously you're at that pivotal stage where it's cementing the rest of your life, and I was like, if I'm going to feel like this for 60, 70 years, like, I don't want to be here. I remember approaching my parents and my mum and saying like I'm depressed, and she was kind of, no, you're not, it's just hormones. And looking back now, she does recognise that, yeah, like it was depression and it was a mental health problem, but that's took years of coaxing and the movement of mental health and it being more talked about now and less stigmatised, that kind of thing. So I don't blame her for it, but it was very frustrating looking back and just it being brushed off as hormones. I kind of, when I became an adult, I still had those wee moments of seeds of doubt, but I kind of buried them right down. And I think I was very unemotional completely. Like, I wouldn't get too close to people. I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't express my emotions. I had problems with that in relationships, and kind of took a weird approach where I used to bottle things up very, very much so. And then it got to a stage where I would flip out and crack the bap, and it would be the worst thing ever. Even though it could have been something so simple that it annoyed me, I could be bringing stuff up from 6 months before, and I realised that it wasn't healthy. Especially given my family, my mum's side of the family, we laugh about how my mum and her sisters and my granny, they have an awful temper. Me and my cousin especially kind of joke about it, saying we don't know how we are normal. And I suppose I'm not, because when I crack the bap, when I properly lose it, that's me. I have to burn myself out. There's nothing that can calm me down. And I don't like being like that, because I kind of scare myself as well. So that's why I kind of came about to be like, right, well, I'm just going to say it as it is and move on. And some people don't like that. And my mum was the first to tell me I can be too honest. But I would rather just say it like it is and move on, rather than you hear it from someone else and it be dramatised, or it be built up and then crack up and talk about something that happened months ago and they probably don't remember when it happened. So that's kind of my approach to confrontation, my approach to being annoyed. And some people really appreciate that, and some people say, yeah, that's 100%, and other people don't like it, but we'll get to that. I don't think I'm a confrontational person, but I wouldn't shy away. I wouldn't let someone talk to me like shit, which it has turned out very bad in some situations, like working in retail and with friends and family members. I'll not name names. But yeah, I think the way that I've kind of put up my front and put up my wall and put on my mask, it blocked emotions. I wouldn't have said I was desensitized to things, but I wouldn't have been very empathetic, because I wouldn't let that annoyed me or let it affect me to other people's situations, which again was very hard because people couldn't see that people could see that I wasn't connecting as much with them and that kind of thing. So I did have a wall up for a good lot of my life, definitely. And I think just through therapy, that was how I learned to unblock that, because I know now that I'm a lot more empathetic and I would be a lot more emotional and like I would speak more about my feelings and that kind of thing, and I suppose it's a good thing and a bad thing, but I'm happier. So things got worse when I moved to university. So I moved to Northampton for university, and one night, and it's about 11 years now and a couple of days since this podcast, and I remember it so clearly. I remember going into my flatmate and saying, "Will we get a Chinese?" She said no. I said okay. So I went into the fridge trying to figure out what I could get, what I could make. And then she came in and said, "No, that's fine. Yeah, let's get a Chinese." So we ordered a Chinese, and it was this place called the Racecourse in Northampton, right beside the university. And it's this massive, big park. And it takes maybe about 20 minutes to walk around it. And it takes 5 minutes to walk through it. I remember leaving to go get the Chinese and putting the headphones in and walking through it and collecting the Chinese and walking back. And I remember coming out of the Chinese and seeing these group of lads on the path deep into the park. And I remember thinking, they're awkward, they're not going to let me pass. So I did like a diagonal shortcut through the grass. And I was walking for quite a while, and you know when you know something, it just isn't right. So I kind of turned around and I could see them following me, but I don't think it was as many as there was. It was maybe just a break off of them following me. So I continued on anyway, didn't think anything of it. And then I remember turning my music on my iPod right down. And then I turned around again and they were much closer and they were all spawned out across the path. So I moved over to the left hand side to let them overtake me. And then I remember a kick in the back and falling forward. And I remember trying to get myself back up and getting hit in the face. And a few hits and cracks, and then I don't really remember anything. I remember waking up in my kitchen covered in blood, and my flatmate really "Oh, are you okay? What happened?" Calling the police, and I remember the police landing and asking me questions, and I was like, "What are you talking about? I haven't left the house." And they were like, "Yeah, you went for a Chinese," and I, no, and I was just so confused, and obviously had a concussion, and my tooth was hanging off, and I'd lost so much blood, and I just don't. Looking back now, I can kind of really remember them asking for my phone, and I can kind of remember walking across the road and looking up into the flat and seeing someone looking out at me. But I don't know whether that's fake memories or not, because my subconscious obviously blocked all that out to protect me. And I remember going to the hospital because I'd lost so much blood, and I had to get a needle through my nose because my septum was about to collapse. And I remember coming out of the hospital into my flatmate's car and instantly looking around me like, who's around me? There's so-and-so beside me. There's so-and-so's way over there. There's another man right over there. And I was so hyper vigilant to where people were. And then I came home, got my tooth fixed. I had 2 scars on my head, which were awful to look at, both superficially because they were right on my head, but also it was like a permanent reminder of what happened. I always remember just kind of, when I was leaving, I always looked to find where people were, and I didn't like people standing behind me. I didn't like having my phone out in public. And then a month later, I remember it was the 25th of November, and a month later it was Christmas Eve, and I remember watching the Keith Lemon film, and I'd never seen it before. And there's a episode of the Keith Lemon film where he goes underground into like a subway, like a underground like pathway under the motorway and things, and I remember these guys walking up to him, and I just instantly was like, he's going to get attacked. And he did. Obviously not as bad as I did, but I just remember thinking it right away, hypervigilant, even though it wasn't happening to me. And that night I went to bed, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and there was a wee old woman sitting at the end of my bed looking at me. And I jumped up, and when I jumped up, she jumped up, and I scrambled around for the lamp, and obviously she was gone. But that was the start of real trouble sleeping. And I remember going to the doctors a couple of months later because I just wasn't sleeping. I was having nightmares all the time. I nearly actually killed myself because I'm petrified of snakes, and I imagined a snake uncoiling itself from my lampshade above my bed, and I squealed, and I remember opening the upstairs window of my room and climbing out, put one leg out, and that's not the first time that's happened. I've constantly dreamed of snakes in the house, people watching me, and cameras recently. I don't know where the camera's coming from, but the past couple of years I imagine there's a camera watching me sleep, which is very strange. I went to the doctors and he gave me sleeping tablets, and that was the worst thing I could have done because I never had sleep paralysis before that. And I remember lying in my uni hall and my body was completely asleep and my mind was so alert. And I remember looking above my wardrobe and the shadows uncoiling themselves into this weird creature that was with tentacles and stuff, trying to get me. And it was just the weirdest situation. And I've had sleep paralysis since then, not imagining things, but it definitely introduced that into my life. And then I remember going to see a counsellor with the university, and she recommended this thing called EMDR, eye movement detection remedy therapy, EMDR, I don't know, I can't remember. But it was vibrating stones in the palm of my hands, and I remember her sitting going, right, where are you? I'm in the park. Okay, what are you doing? I'm walking away. Okay, keep walking. What do you smell? Grass. What do you see? Grass. What do you hear? Nothing. Okay, keep walking. And then the whole time, each of my hands was 5 minutes later, what's happening now? I'm still walking. Okay, keep going. And to be fair, I was moving away. I was moving back home, and then I was moving to Liverpool then about a month later. So I just gave up. I was just like, yeah, it's grand. I just thought it was the biggest pile of shit ever. And then I just kept having nightmares, kept walking the streets, constantly looking around me. If someone came up behind me, if they were walking too fast or they were running and I didn't realise they were there, I would really panic. Hyper alert all the time. And then I realised when I went to Ibiza there was about 7 of us, and obviously in Ibiza you're out drinking all the time, you're not really sleeping that much. And I came back the first night after I came back, and I remember my girlfriend at the time was staying over at my house, and I remember waking up and I was on top of her with my hand around her neck, and I'm not a violent person at all, and I was so shocked. I remember getting off and going, what the actual fuck am I doing? And I couldn't get over it, and I felt so bad, and I just knew I was right, I need help. And I don't remember a dream of having to defend myself or anything like that. I don't remember anything. I just had no idea what was going on. So I went back when I moved to Liverpool, and I went back to student counselling for a couple of years, and they kind of just it was getting worse. I remember walking to uni, and you had to walk past all these houses to get to uni from my halls, and I just remember standing thinking, there could be someone with a rifle just out of that window pointing at me right now about to shoot me. And it was nothing to do with what I went through, nothing to do with my trauma. I just didn't know what I was doing. And I remember coming back from one of the appointments and I just felt so bad. I just remember sitting, and I'm not being macho here. I'm not a crier. And I remember sitting on my bed crying, being like, when is this going to go away? Why can't I shake this? I think I'm quite strong-minded, and I just couldn't shake this feeling, and I couldn't stop the nightmares, and I couldn't stop the flashbacks. And I just remember sitting crying and being like, what the fuck am I going to do with myself? It's been almost a year and I'm still feeling like this. So I kept going to see the counsellors, and then I think one of them just literally said to me, look, there's nothing more we can do. You're going to have to go through the NHS, and because this was all through uni, and as good as it was, obviously I was just a hopeless case. So I remember going then to well, not that they aren't professional, but an NHS approved, and she was brilliant, but she was also like digging around my past about my biological father and about my exes and about that 14-year-old boy that struggled to make friends. And I was kind of like, I'm not here for that. Like, I understand now that does affect me as a person, but that wasn't the main issue. Like, I could have happily talked about that in a few sessions after, whenever like the likes of I got recommended, well, obviously I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and I got recommended cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT, to try and work around your way of talking and to yourself and thinking about things. But by the time we got talking about exes and my parents and my siblings and all that kind of stuff, like, I was seeing her for a few months, maybe once every week, maybe once every 2 weeks actually, I think it was. And she went off on the sick, and it was about coming up to 3 years since it happened, since the attack happened. And I just thought, it's not going to improve. It wasn't as bad as it was, but it was getting a wee bit better. And I just thought, the more years go by, the more it'll get better, which is what happened. But at that stage in my life, I was graduated. I was working in a job that I didn't like, that was retail, which was beer money, when I was at uni. And then suddenly I moved home and moved to Belfast, and that was paying the rent. And I somehow stupidly, because I was stupid enough to fall for it, fell in a manager role. And, it's full-time work, it's better pay, it's all this stuff which I really didn't care about, and I was applying for journalism jobs on the side. And then I got to the stage where the manager job was going to pay more than if I actually did get a journalism job, which was shit, because they really did have you by the balls then. But I hated it. I wouldn't say I hated the job then. I never liked working in retail because I didn't like the way the public spoke to you. If someone out in the street spoke to me the way they did, I would say I'd like it as a move on. But obviously you can't when you're working in retail, because you're the business, you're representing the business, that kind of thing. But I really struggled with that. And then as a manager, I was getting paid buttons more than staff for the shit you were dealing with. I hated it. And then I need to protect what I say because I don't want to get sued. Our business was bought over by a supermarket. So they started changing the job. So my job role changed, and I found myself applying for a job that I didn't even want, fighting for a job that I really didn't want at all. So obviously my mental health was affected by working 5 days a week in a job that I fucking hated, getting spoken to like shit by customers and managers. and not really sleeping that well again because I was dreading going back to work, and I see my friends getting grad jobs and doing really well for themselves, and they were going out on a Saturday night, and I couldn't go out because I could have been working to 10 that night and back in the next morning at 8 o'clock, and I just hated it. I really hated it. And looking back now, I don't know why I lasted so long. And a couple of years before I quit, my biological dad died. I was coming back from Liverpool actually from a party weekend, and my sister rang me and said, "Did you hear about blah blah blah?" No. Why is she talking about him? It's a bit strange. Oh, he's again. I don't want to offend anyone if they are listening. I doubt they are, but he is in critical condition in Belfast. So I went to bed that night and my head was up my arse. I was like, I was working 7:30 to 3:30 that day, and I thought, right, I'll come out of work and I'll go. And if he's in critical condition, he's probably not going to be able to see me anyway. But for my own kind of confusion, like I was the most confused I've ever been in my entire life about a situation, wondering what to do. And I tossed and turned, wondering what to do. And then I thought, right, that's what I'll do. And I think I got 2 hours sleep, and I woke up and went, no, I'm not going to the hospital. What if the new wife's there? What if his children are there? He's got a few children to her. I don't want to upset them. I don't want to upset myself. And I left work and I was just on autopilot. I drove around for about an hour and a half, just drove around Belfast, just random streets, not even like I wasn't even contemplating what I was doing. And then I got home and I felt so ill, like thought I was going to be sick. I was so ill, so I just went to sleep, and I woke up and it was about maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and my mum rang me and found out that he had died, and I just had the weirdest sensation going through my, like I was like, right, and it was just, I can't describe it, but I was fine. Not that I was fine, but I was managing it. And then the second my mum hung up the phone, I started crying. And it wasn't like, like it wasn't like a really like child's cry, like very like agitated and struggling for breath and that kind of thing. It was just like someone had turned on a tap in my eyes. And before that day, I couldn't remember the last time I cried. I'd say it was years before. And I remember just starting to panic, like what's going on? What's going on? Why, blah, blah. And I rang my mum and said, I want to come home. And she said, right, okay. And I cried the whole way to Dungiven. And I call it Dungiven, don't giving a fuck. Because it's like whenever I left Dungiven, the tank was empty, someone turned the tap off. Like I was just like, I'm taking time off work, I'm going down here. He lived down the street, like not down the street, but he lived 3 or 4 miles away. He didn't live in Australia. He had plentiful opportunities to contact me. The reason I didn't was me and my mum were best friends. Like me and my mum have a bond, and everyone kind of sees it. And I know she's got 3 children now, and sorry, Wilco and Cora, but it was just us 2 for months, and it's never, that bond connection hasn't ever, I'm getting emotional here, that bond's never stopped. And I remember like asking when I was younger, what happened? And she kind of, every time I asked, she changed her answer to what age I was. So it was kind of, he found out that I was pregnant, and he didn't want to, hate the baby, so he left. And a few years later, it was, oh, he was having an affair. And I remember my 18th birthday. I remember this so well. Like, I remember my 18th birthday, maybe not my 18th birthday, but a day after my 18th birthday or something like that. And I remember coming into my bedroom and you could see she was visibly upset. And I was like, what's wrong with you? And I remember just kind of looking at me and going, you're not going to go look for him, are you? And at first I actually didn't know who she was talking about. I was like, what? Who? And then it kind of dawned on me and I went, he's had 18 years. He knows where I am. He's not a one night stand that doesn't know about me. He knew you were pregnant. He was married to you. He knows where your family live. He knows where we live. He knows everything. Why would I risk going to that front door and him slamming the door in my face? And that's what she was worried about as well. And whenever he died, it was all these unanswered questions of, did he ever think about me? Would we ever have had a relationship? Did he ever want to meet me? Like, all these kind of questions that were running through my head. And it was just strange to think, although nothing came of it, the opportunity was always there for him to contact me or me to contact him, or us to accidentally bump into each other. Like, I know what he looks like. I know what he drove. I know what his work was. So I did see him, but I don't think he knew it was me. And it was like that was just snatched away from me. And that was my first experience of grief as well. Like, I was, 25? To be 25 and not experience any grief. And that's one of the things that the girl told me, my counsellor told me. She was like, you're very young and you've experienced so much. Like, the only thing you haven't experienced was grief. And that was my first introduction to grief. Someone that brought me into this world, not in that way, but like, is the reason why I'm here, half a reason why I'm here. And I never met them, but I'm reacting to this news, and it was so strange. And I took a few days off work. I talked to my friends, I talked to my family. My dad was actually a massive help in that, and he really surprised me, because I thought like, he's going to be like, what? We never kind of talked about it before, but I thought he was going to be like, why does he care about this, and why is he taking time off work, and what's he care if he died, or why would he want to go to the funeral? But he completely shocked me. Like, he was like, I knew him, I had a few I used to drink with him, I know his family, like, I'll go to the funeral with you if you don't want to go by yourself. And I was just so shocked. And I think in a way that helped me know that I was making the right decision, because I was like, my mum has been two parents to me, and she's been more than two parents to me throughout my whole life. My dad came along, and I'm not going to sit here and say we're best friends, but at the end of the day, he showed me how to tie my laces. I remember him trying to get me to do well in 11 plus, helping me with homeworks. He helped me with my first house. He helped me with my car. Like, he's always there for, not, I don't want to say problematic, but I don't know what word I'm looking for practical things. Like, I'll go to him if my car broke down, or I'll go to him if I got a bill that I didn't really understand. And it was actually on one of those nights that between the death and the funeral where we were speaking, and I was just like, look, when I was a teenager, we fucking hated each other, and I never spoke to him, and he never spoke to me, because it would just end up in a fight. And I remember, like, really, really insecure and really juvenile things, like, oh, he's got his 3 kids and that's the family, and I'm not wanted, I'm the snotter. And it's hard for me to actually say that, but I thought that all the time. I always thought I was baggage, and that's the family, and I'm just the black sheep. And I hate using that term because my mum uses it all the time, and it does my head in. But that's how I felt. Like, I felt like the black sheep. I felt like I was an unwanted extra in the family. And I remember like being really, really young and like him carrying on with my brother and my sisters and me just being like, oh, that's his kids. And he's never made a difference. It's just because we aren't close. But again, like I said to him, look, I'm stuck with you now, and I don't want you to think I'm stuck with you. But at the end of the day, we're never going to be best friends. Like, if you were my age or if I was your age, we wouldn't gravitate towards each other. We just wouldn't be friends. And he never admitted it, but you could see him kind of contemplating it in his head because it's true. Like, him and my brother would be close because they're quite similar and they work in the same field, that kind of thing. But we don't have anything in common. Like, very, very few things we have in common. And whereas me and my mum could be sitting talking about books or films or, oh, did you see this TV show? Or we're just very similar personalities as well. But when I was younger, I just thought that was because he didn't like me and because I was an add-on and because he had his own family and I was the unwanted child. But it wasn't whatsoever, but it was just juvenile thoughts. And we sat that night, it was the night before my biological father's funeral, and I remember him turning to me and going, I'll do whatever you want to do. If you want to go by yourself, if you want to go and stand at the back, if you want to watch from afar, do whatever you want. And in a way, I was just like, I don't like people. I know people that had died before, and I don't like wakes, and it makes my teeth itch. It really creeps me out, and I was just like, I don't want my first funeral to be a stranger, because that's who he was. And I just thought had a few days to come round, and I went, no. As awful as that sounds, I know people have had opinions in the past, and they probably will still be listening to this, but he was nothing to me, and I was nothing to him. And I put his family's needs before mine as well, because I thought if I show up, there could be a whole fucking row, and it's not worth it. He's not worth it for me, and I don't want to offend anyone by saying that, but for me, he wasn't worth it. And I remember my dad coming into me in the morning of the funeral and going, right, what are you doing? I went, I don't want to go. And he goes, are you going to feel that way in 10 years, 15 years, 10 days, 10 weeks? Like, do you feel you'll regret it? And I said no. And it's been 5 years, and I've never once regretted that decision. But through that, I remember my mum saying, you could speak to his mum or his sister, as much as you might not want me to admit that if you are listening, Maggie. They were always lovely, and I found out then that they were actually there when I was born, and they came and seen me. And then it's actually my granny's fault, my mum's fault, because I was getting christened, and she was seen as a single parent, and I used the church. Don't get me fucking started on that shite. I couldn't have a normal christening. I had to be later on in the day, and it needed to be like an invite. And my mum's mum said, you cannot invite my biological granny or any of that family because you're not christening him their name, and that'll be so embarrassing. And so my mum didn't, and my auntie found out that my christening was a few days before, and she told my granny, right, well, made her decision, and that's fine, we will walk away. As awful as that sounds, I think that was the best thing that they could have done for me, because I grew up always knowing, but I think as a child, having another granny and this other family, and not knowing why daddy didn't want you or why daddy didn't speak to you, I think that really would have messed me up. And I think that I needed the maturity of me looking now to know that, so I don't resent either of them for doing that, and there's no ill feelings. But that was the day after the funeral, and I thought, my head's been up my hole for a few days. I need to get back to life. And that's it. So I kind of just shelved it. But it stayed on the shelf and it picked at me for about a year. Over a year, actually. And I had a week off and I remember going, right, I'm doing this day, I'm doing this day, I'm doing this day. This day I'm going to my granny's house. And I did. I went in the late afternoon and I was shitting myself. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. I remember walking up to the door and they had like a wee alleyway down the other side and being like, oh fuck, where's that lead? And I'm glad I didn't go there because it would have been a dead end, or it would have been the back of their house. And I remember knocking on the door and no one answered. I went, right, okay. And I ran back to the car and I ran home with my tail between my legs. And then about an hour and a half later, I went, right, let's try again. Because I was like, I know that today is the day that I've said I'm doing it. And if I don't do it today, I'll never do it. So I remember pulling up and seeing a pink hoodie moving across the window. And I went, oh God, there's definitely someone in. And I remember going up the door and knocking on the door. And my auntie answered. And I said, is Kathleen in? And she went, yeah. And she stood back. And I didn't move because I was like, I'm not crossing this threshold until they know who I am. She kind of stood forward again, realising that she's inviting this opposite strangers in. And I said, it's Brad. And she took a wee while to register who I was. And then she went, right, okay, come on in. So I walked in. The first thing I seen was the stair lift on the right. And I thought, right, that's why she didn't answer the door. And I walked in and she introduced me. And I thought it was going to be like a half-hour chat. I was there for about 4 hours. And she cried the whole time. My granny cried and cried and cried. And I got the answers I wanted. Like, there was a whole family bust up. And what they knew of him, he didn't speak about me. He had no desire to meet me. He had a child around the same age as my brother's age. And they said, you're going to have to let them know in case they meet up at some point. And he just kind of shook his head. He didn't want to talk about it. So in a way, it was refreshing. I wouldn't say I was downtrodden. Like, if they had turned around and said, he talked about you all the time, he really wanted to meet you, I might have thought, fuck. But it kind of just cemented that I'd done the right thing. And it was the weirdest thing because I didn't tell anyone that I was going there. And even when I came home, I was missing for hours. And everyone was ringing and texting me to turn my phone off. And they thought I was dead in a ditch somewhere. And I said to my mum where I was. And she didn't believe, actually. She thought I was joking. And it's like she knew I was going and rang and said, right, say X, Y, and Z. And that's how I know that everything my mum told me was the truth. Because they had no reason to back him up or no reason to lie about him. And they said everything that my mum said, so I knew it was 100% true. And I could have left that day and been happy and moved on, that was it. But the emotion that my granny showed was just, like, thinking about it now, like, I was instantly uncomfortable because I don't like affection and all that stuff, but I just couldn't believe how much, like, and I found out that she found a baby picture of me from primary school and she had it on her Bible, that kind of thing. It was just how I was affecting this woman, and 26 years had passed. Like, it was just incredible. And my auntie, shout out Mags, I know you listen to this, like, she was just me as a 50-year-old woman. Like, I remember just sitting down going, right, you're not going to want to hear this, but I say it like it is, and this is this, and this, and this, and this. And I looked at her and I just went, okay, this is the whole nature versus nature thing. This is where I've got it from. And we laugh about it now, and we're really, really close. We're like friends more than nephew and auntie, but I admired her for it, and I just thought, fuck, this is great. I'd rather not beat about the bush and pussyfoot around, and because that's the way I'm like, and this is obviously where I get it from. And we talked for hours, and when I was leaving, she said, "You will come back, won't you?" My granny said, "You will come back," and I promised her I would, and my auntie gave me her number. I could have showed up there and they could have slammed the door in my face. I could have showed up there and they went, "What the fuck do you want?" The kindness that they showed me made me come back. And it turns out my granda had promised my granny that I would come back, and he just hoped that he was alive when I did. And unfortunately, he'd already died. And um, I feel guilty about that, but I know I shouldn't. And the fact that they said that there was a family fallout, like I said to them, if I knew that I could have came to this door and he wouldn't answer the door, I would have been there the second he left the second he left that house for the last time. I would have been round the corner waiting to come in and talk. So that's kind of the reason for abandonment issues and that kind of thing. And I suppose I should maybe talk about his family. So he's got a couple of children, and they found out about me now, and they were angry to start off with. I think one maybe still isn't too happy, but at the end of the day, I had as much as I did nothing apart from being born. I wasn't the one that lied to them, but I can't process it the same way that they process it, and I can't see similarities because I've always known, so I've never had to process it. I've never got a shock, and that's what the family. Still can't believe I forget that person's name. It's not a solicitor. It's like a whatever your woman said anyway. Your woman said I would advise to tell him, and that's the best thing she probably could have done. Because I might have felt different and I might have felt the way they did. And one of them reached out to me a couple of years ago, and they reached out to me because the few interactions we hadn't been very nice about him dying and me admitting that I was not even to them, just to other people. And I can understand where they're coming from, because to them he was maybe this amazing person, but when I said that to them, I was like, we're grieving over the same man but two completely different people, which is true. And he might have been a superstar and a superhero and all this stuff, but to me he was the person that left my mum heartbroken, pregnant, and never made any effort to meet me or have a relationship with me. And we just agreed to disagree. I'll just say it because I've said it to them. The thing that annoyed me most was that they didn't call my mum a liar, but they said that I had all these questions because of things I've been told, and nothing was proven. And my mum was the faithful one in that marriage, and I was ferociously, and still am ferociously, protective over her, and they were protective over their father too, which I understand. I'm not gonna, but no one calls my mum a liar, and I didn't even care. I was like, look, you're grieving. I can't understand where you're going, what you're going through, but do not come for my mum. She is innocent in all this, and she always has been. But they apologised, and there's no relationship there, but I've said I'll be as involved or as uninvolved as you want, so the ball's in their court. I doubt they're going to listen to this, but if they are listening, and that goes for the other sibling as well. As for the new woman, as I would call her, she hasn't approached me in person, but I've seen her a good lot, and she's approached me through other people, saying that she would love to meet me and would love to speak to me about him, but I have no... Maybe if I didn't meet Margaret and my granny, I would feel different, or maybe if I met them and they were horrible, I'd feel different, but no, I know it's the truth, and I don't want any smoke blowing up my hole, and I don't want any godlike things being said about someone that's dead and can't tell their own story. And I'm just fine. I have no. At the end of the day, if what was said is true, and I have no doubts that it is, but she also played a part in hurting my mum, and I will be on her side till the end. So she's nothing to me. At the end of the day, the children are innocent in all of this. They were born, and I was born, and I'm innocent too, I suppose. But if they want a relationship with me, they are fully entitled to one, and I will be as involved or uninvolved as they want me to be. But with her, she is nothing to me, and that's the way it's going to stay. So yeah, I realise that I've been trying to keep this as chronological as I can, but I've kind of dipped in and out and kind of confused you all about that. Well, fuck, we're an hour in. You've probably done listening an hour ago, probably. So yeah, that brings us up to the most recent one, probably the worst one, if I'm completely honest with you. And I know what you're thinking, an hour in and I'm going to get into the worst one, but so yeah, it was just working in retail, and like I said, I was applying for a job that I didn't like. I hated my job, hated being spoken to like shit by managers and customers, and just the whole life of it. And COVID hit, and I thought that we were going to be closed, and we weren't. Because the supermarket had bought us over, we were technically still classified as essential because we were inside a supermarket which obviously had to remain open. What we were selling was not essential. The arguably essential things that you could buy with us were on the shelves in the supermarket, or could be ordered on the supermarket's website. And you remember everyone, I'm sure, remembers the start of COVID, like the hysteria and the panic toilet roll buying and all that kind of stuff. But I was managing and hadn't a clue what to do, and my aunties were ringing me because my lungs have collapsed in the past, and they were ringing being like, what are you doing? Why are you at work? Come home. And I was like, look, I can't get out of here. Like they have me. It was either take on paid leave or quit. And we were one of 5, I think, in the whole Northern Ireland. So people were coming from anywhere. Like, people were coming from Omagh to Belfast to try and return, bearing in mind we weren't accepting returns, to try and return a toy that was £6. Like, how is that essential? That's a day out. They were fucking bored, and they thought, oh, well, sure, we'll go and get this returned or get this replaced. People weren't taking it seriously. No wonder so many people died, and no wonder it went on for so fucking long. And people, it really annoys me, people saying, oh, that was the best time of my life, either not working at all or working from home and drinking at 2 o'clock and sitting out in the garden, and the weather was beautiful. It was the fucking worst time of my life. So stressful, getting spoken to like shit by customers, managers literally inches from your face going on about social distancing when you can literally feel the speckles of their spit hitting you in the face. It was so stressful for someone that hated their job as it was. And obviously because of my health with my lungs collapsing, I was obviously even more hypervigilant. I hated it. I lost loads of weight. I was so stressed. And I remember, so when was that? March? By August, I remember going on a trip with my friends to Galway, and I just remember everything was getting more sensitized. I was kind of falling back into the same routines as when I was a teenager, because it was just my mental health. I just took a massive decline. My self-confidence was nil. And I just remember wee things like that usually wouldn't annoy me or wouldn't make me think twice, but some of my friends saying stuff, and I'm not going to get into it because it's water under the bridge, and I don't want to bring it all up again, because that friendship group at the moment and me, are on is it's a bit temperamental at the moment as it is, so I don't want to cause a whole stir. But there was an argument anyway, because again, I fucking say things, I just come out and say it, and people don't like that. And there was a massive argument, not even a massive argument, just a whole kick up that it was my fault. And I left and went into a different room. There's 3 or 4 flats that we were in, and then there was another argument in there, and then I went into another flat, and there wasn't an argument, but there was something about, I wanted someone to come, but they couldn't come because of you, because you're too in your face, and you just say things like it is, and they wouldn't have liked that. So that was 3 different people in less than 2 days. That was my fault. And I had customers screaming in my face that it was all my fault, and I had an ego trip, and I just wanted to tell them that they couldn't walk down the one-way aisle, and I was making up these rules, and I just didn't want to return their TV, and I just I'm a very sociable person as well, so I think sitting in the house and not being able to get out, and the only time I left the house was to go to work, and I wasn't seeing people, I wasn't interacting with people, I just wasn't happy. And I remember earlier that day there was a lake. We're staying at like these like student halls, and there was a lake, and I remember we were asking a grounds person where it was, and them saying, yeah, go down there and wherever, don't swim in it. He said you could be up to your ankles, and then it's 50 feet, you'll drown, basically. And I remember walking towards that lake. I was that upset and that fucked off with life, and I just was like, I just want it to end. Like, I can't deal with this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. There's no way out. I've applied for so many jobs and I can't get out of the jobs. All my friends are falling out with me. Everyone's saying everything's my fault. And whatever way the car park was, I just did a round. I went down towards it and I turned around. Didn't turn around, but I went the other way towards the car park and back around, and I sat outside for hours on my own, trying to talk myself down because I was so close to doing it. And that was probably the darkest night I've ever had. And the next day, I remember we were coming back up and we stopped off at Bundoor and all this stuff, and I didn't break breath to anyone. I couldn't speak to anyone because I was that bad. And I had to go back to work the next day, and I couldn't speak to anyone, and I couldn't speak to customers, and that cloud didn't move from me for about 2 weeks. And I remember it was my sister's engagement party at our house, and I was sitting there, and I was like, why am I here? I am not wanted here. I was never wanted here. I was an add-on. I'm a bonus brother, I think was the term I used when I was in therapy, and I'm actually physically shaking my head saying that now. And I just had to leave, and I went to my bed, and I remember my brother and my mum and dad at the bottom of the stairs, and me walking past them, and my brother going, where are you going? I was on my way to bed, and my dad jokingly being like, oh, Mr. Smirnoff, and I couldn't turn around. And I remember getting into bed, and my mum coming up and opening the door and saying, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I just want to go to bed. I'm really tired, bad form, wherever. And I remember closing the door. I remember crying myself to sleep that night. Like, I was like, what the fuck? I am a 20... What age was I then? 28. I'm a 28-year-old man, and I'm sitting thinking that I'm not wanted in this family, and this is stuff that I thought when I was 8 years old. And it's so weird, because there's a thing that goes around the internet, and it's like, look at a photo of yourself when you're at your lowest point and look at a photo of yourself now, and there's a photo of me and my sister that night, and you could just tell I am fucking miserable and I have this fake, I couldn't even smile properly, and I look at that and I'm like, I can't believe how bad of experience I was in. And I woke up the next day and my mum made me go a walk, and I burst into tears again, and I was like, I can't do this. Everything in my life, I just don't want to be here. I don't want anything to do with anyone or anything. And luckily she got me to speak to a counsellor, and I took 6 weeks off work, and I kind of came around a bit, but then as soon as I went back to work, it wasn't as bad. The feelings weren't as bad, but the hate was still there and the resentment was still there. And I always said, if there's another lockdown, I'm not working it. And there was, but it wasn't as like the other places were open and we weren't as busy and that kind of thing. But it was the darkest point of my life, definitely 100%. And it's so weird now because I look at their wedding and I never would have thought I was going to be at their wedding. They have a baby now, my nephew, I'm fucking mad about, and I'm just like, I was at their engagement party and I thought, I don't want to be here, I'm going to die. I'm not going to see this wedding. I'm not going to see a future. I'm not going to... And I quit that job a year later, and in a way, it was a bit... I wish I could shake the man's hand. So my manager was a Canadian boy, loveliest fella ever, so nice. And then another boy came in who I actually knew from years ago. He was actually one of my older managers, who I did always get on with, and is very black and white as well, so that's why I get on with him. But the way he spoke to me one day, I asked for 2 weekends off the whole Christmas period. I said, I need this weekend off because it's 2 of my friends' birthdays, and I need this weekend off because I'm at a wedding. And I couldn't get the first weekend off for my friends' birthdays, which I think is fucking ridiculous, but whatever. And it was a whole fucking fight then for the wedding as well. And without getting into it, he said that I should have organised something that wasn't my responsibility. We delegated responsibilities. My responsibility was not the rota. And there was a problem with the rota. And he roared at me. He rang and he roared down the phone to me. And I thought, my fucking parents don't even speak to me like that. How fucking dare he speak to me like that? And I put the key in the till and I walked out. And I still have to darken that door today. And people joke about with me all the time. Like, people go, oh, that, like, I don't even let them say the word in front of me. People say, oh, sure, we can go here and get, nope, I'm not darkening their door. Even a branch that I didn't work in, or even another branch that I've never been to before, I'm like, nope, I will never, ever, I went once for a lamp and I didn't even go. I was raging that I had to buy it, but I had vouchers that were running out, and I sent someone else to go get it for me because I refused to go in. And what they, like, people think it's a big joke, but what they did to me mentally was fucking disgusting. They shouldn't have been open during a global pandemic where people were scared to leave the house, and the shit that I had to deal with and the shit that my staff had to deal with, and other staff and other managers. I'm not just saying that it was just solely myself, but that mental breakdown was not needed at all. And to think that I could have fucking walked into that lake and missed my sister's wedding and the birth of my first nephew and my 30th and so many of my friends' 30ths and so much more stuff to look forward to is fucking disgusting. That my mental health could be so bad because of that job. And I left, I walked out, and I have never looked back, and I fucking 80%, 90% of my problems are gone. And the 10% of my problems that I have now, I have the skills through CBT to deal with them. And I'm happy that I do. And I just can't believe that the difference, and it'll be coming up to 2 years now since I quit, and I just, people say I'm a completely different person, and I am, because I was miserable, and it just shows you the environment. The people that have been on here before have talked about environment, whether that's home or family or work. That was work, 100%. But it's weird how the work environment and how I feel there brought on me feeling like that about my family and me feeling like that about my friends. And it's just crazy that my mind was so couldn't be brought up and couldn't be. It took months of therapy to bring me around, and like I hate to go on about it, but at my sister's wedding, I remember just looking around, going, my mind frame compared to the engagement party is fucking crazy. Like, and I'd left by that stage. I'd left maybe coming up to a year, and I was like, it's so insane. And I would say to anyone in any situation, like any job that you hate, fucking get out. Like, I know people kept saying, why do you work there? And I kept saying, I've applied for these jobs and I can't get them. Fucking leave. Like, I had bought a house in the October and I quit on the start of December, and I was like, how the fuck am I going to pay this mortgage? And luckily I got something right away, and I'm still in that line of work, and it's a 9 to 5 if I want, and no shit at all. I don't have to listen to shit. I don't have to deal with shit. I don't have to get my back up. I don't have to be defensive. I don't have to speak to anyone the way that they speak to me. It's just a breath of fresh air. And I know I'm going on a wee bit now, and I'm going past the time, but it's the difference that it's done on my life is astronomical. Like, I'm so much happier. I have great friends. I have great family. I enjoy my job. Well, say turn your pain into art. As a few people have said on this, and I've probably said it before about my books. Like, I've wrote about it, and I rewrite what you know, and I'm happy that I've done that. And yeah, it's crazy. And maybe I should have had someone on here to show me, to tell me when to fuck up and to try and steer me in the right direction. But that was the bullet points. I kind of wrote down the times in my life where I was at critical point, or where I noticed that where triggers were, or where things began, which is what I'm asking all the brave guests. And I just knew that I couldn't expect them to talk and me not do something myself. So hopefully I haven't bored you all to fucking tears. I'll see you in the new year, and hope you all have a happy and healthy Christmas. I know I will be. So yeah, see you in January.